It was December 11th, 2025 at 2:47 a.m. when the crushing weight of an unnamed desperation, a spiritual suffocation I couldn't articulate even to myself, drove me to the rocky outcrop in the mountain wilderness 3 miles beyond the edge of town, and there, surrounded by the jagged granite peaks that pierced the pre-dawn darkness like the fingers of ancient giants, the wind howling through the pines below with a sound like 10,000 whispered prayers, the temperature hovering just above freezing so that each breath became visible proof of life itself, Jesus appeared standing on the edge of the precipice with his arms outstretched toward the valley below. That not everyone who sees this message tonight has been chosen to receive it, that there is a marking, an invisible seal being placed on foreheads even now as eyes read these words, and that this marking separates those who will hear from those who cannot, those who will be protected from those who will be left wondering why they missed what was always right in front of them. Not everyone who sees this message is meant to see it. Some will scroll past, some will ignore it. But you've been marked. I know that sounds impossible. I know it sounds like the kind of sensational claim that makes rational people close their browsers and move on with their lives. But before you do that, before you decide this is just another voice in the endless noise of the internet, I need you to understand something. I'm Jonathan Roumie. I've portrayed Jesus Christ in The Chosen, the largest crowdfunded television series in history, watched by hundreds of millions across the globe. I've spent years studying scripture, years in prayer, years trying to understand the heart of the Savior I've been called to represent, and none of that prepared me for what happened on that mountaintop. Before we go any further, I want to do something I do in every one of these messages. I want you to leave your prayer request in the comments below. Anything you're carrying, anything that's weighing you down, any burden that feels too heavy, leave it there. I read them, I pray over them, this community prays over them. We are a family of believers and we carry each other. And if you're someone who truly believes, if you're someone who wants to be part of this movement of people who refuse to accept watered-down Christianity, who refuse to ignore what God is doing right now in this moment, then subscribe to this channel. Click that notification bell. Because what I'm going to share with you over these next few nights, not everyone is meant to hear. YouTube's algorithm doesn't promote messages like this. The powers of this world don't want you to know what I'm about to tell you. But heaven has marked you. And that mark is both a blessing and a responsibility. Let me take you back to that mountain. I didn't plan to go there that night. I'd been lying in bed for 3 hours, staring at the ceiling of my hotel room, feeling something building inside my chest. Not anxiety exactly, not fear, but a pressure, like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm, like creation itself was holding its breath. At 2:30 a.m., I gave up trying to sleep. I pulled on jeans, a heavy jacket, hiking boots. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I didn't entirely know myself. I just knew I needed to go up, higher, away from the valley, away from the lights of civilization, away from everything that cluttered the space between earth and sky. The trail was treacherous in the darkness, even with my flashlight. Loose stones shifted under my feet. Branches I couldn't quite see scratched at my face and hands. My breath came in ragged clouds. The temperature had dropped to maybe 35 degrees, cold enough that my fingers grew numb even inside my gloves, but I kept climbing. The rocky outcrop I'd been to once before, months earlier, during a location scout that never materialized into anything, was about 40 minutes up the mountain. It was a flat shelf of granite, maybe 30 feet across, jutting out over the valley like the prow of some ancient stone ship. During the day you could see for miles, the serpentine river cutting through the valley floor, the patchwork of farms and forests, the distant peaks of the range beyond. At night, it was something else entirely. I reached it at 2:47 a.m. I remember checking my watch, though I don't know why. Maybe some part of me knew I'd need to remember the exact moment. Maybe some part of me knew this was a threshold I was crossing. The wind hit me immediately when I stepped onto the outcrop. It wasn't the gentle breeze you feel in the valley. This was wind, powerful, constant, coming up from below and streaming across the granite shelf with enough force to make me stagger. It carried the scent of pine resin and cold stone, and something else I couldn't name, something ancient. Above me, the stars were so bright they didn't look real. The Milky Way stretched across the sky like a river of light, and I could see Jupiter hanging low on the western horizon, brilliant and steady. No moon, just starlight and darkness, and the vast, indifferent beauty of creation. I walked to the edge and looked down. The valley was a pool of darkness dotted with the occasional pinprick of light, a farmhouse, a street lamp, evidence of human life far below. The wind roared up the cliff face, and I could hear, faintly beneath it, the sound of water. A stream somewhere in the darkness below, tumbling over rocks. I don't know what I'm doing here, I said out loud. My voice was immediately torn away by the wind, scattered into the darkness. But I'm here. I'm listening. And that's when the temperature changed. It wasn't gradual. One moment I was cold, pulling my jacket tighter, tucking my chin against the wind. The next moment, warmth. Not the warmth of standing near a fire or stepping into a heated room. The warmth of presence, of being suddenly, utterly not alone. The wind didn't stop, but it changed. It was no longer pushing against me, but swirling around me, creating a pocket of stillness at the center where I stood. And he was there. Jesus stood 10 feet from me, at the very edge of the outcrop silhouetted against the stars. His robes, because yes, he wore robes, the traditional simple garments I'd worn myself 1,000 times on set, moved in the wind, but he didn't. He stood perfectly still, perfectly balanced on the edge of that granite precipice, arms outstretched toward the valley below, as if he were about to either bless it or mourn over it. I couldn't breathe. I'd portrayed this man for years. I'd studied his words, his mannerisms, his character. I'd prayed to him every day of my life, but I had never been in his presence. Not like this. Not with every cell in my body suddenly aware that I was standing in the presence of holiness so complete, so absolute, that my own existence felt like a shadow, like something barely real by comparison. "Jonathan," he said, and his voice was everything at once, gentle and terrible, quiet and loud enough to shake the mountains. "Do you know why you're here?" I couldn't speak. I tried. My mouth opened, but no sound came. He turned to face me, and I saw his eyes. In every depiction I'd ever studied, every painting and icon and film interpretation, artists had tried to capture those eyes and failed, because they weren't just kind, they weren't just loving, they were knowing. They saw everything, every thought I'd ever had, every sin I'd ever committed, every moment of doubt and faith and fear and hope, and they looked at me anyway with such love that I felt my knees buckle. "You're here because you've been marked," he said, "and because I need you to understand what that marking means." "Marked?" I managed to whisper. "Not everyone sees what you're seeing right now, Jonathan. Not everyone hears what you're hearing. My Father has placed a seal on certain foreheads, invisible to human eyes, but blazing like the sun to those in the spiritual realm. It's not about worthiness. It's not about how much you pray or how faithfully you serve. It's about timing. It's about assignment. It's about the fact that judgment is coming and those who are marked are being prepared." The wind surged, and I heard it then, not words exactly, but groaning, like the earth itself was in pain. "What you don't understand," Jesus continued, stepping closer to me, "is that the marking has already begun. Right now, tonight, as people across the world see the message you'll deliver, some will feel a stirring in their spirit, a recognition, a knowing that they can't explain. That's the mark. That's heaven saying, this one is mine. This one will be ready." "Ready for what?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know the answer. "For what's coming," he said simply. "For the separation of sheep and goats, for the harvest, for the moment when I return not as the suffering servant, but as the King of Kings and Lord of Lords." He gestured to the valley below, and suddenly, I don't know how to explain this except to say it happened, my vision changed. The darkness lifted. I could see the valley as if it were full daylight, every detail sharp and clear, and I could see more than the physical landscape. I saw people, thousands of them, millions, going about their lives, working, sleeping, eating, playing, worrying about bills and relationships and careers, normal people living normal lives. And I saw the marks. Some people had seals on their foreheads, glowing softly like brands of light. But most, oh God, most, had nothing. They moved through their lives completely unaware that they were unmarked, unprepared, heading toward a horizon they couldn't see. "This is what breaks my heart," Jesus said. And when I looked at him, I saw tears streaming down his face, catching the starlight. I died for all of them, every single one. My blood was sufficient for every human being who has ever lived or ever will live. But not all will choose me. Not all will accept the mark. And time is so short now, Jonathan, so terribly short. "What do you want me to do?" I asked desperately. "I want you to deliver a message," he said. I want you to tell them that if they're seeing this, if they've made it this far, if something kept them from scrolling past, they've been marked. Heaven has chosen them to hear this warning, and they have a choice to make. Have a choice. He reached out and touched my forehead with one finger, and I felt something like electricity pass through my entire body. It didn't hurt, but it was intense. A sensation of being simultaneously taken apart and put back together, of being known and seen and claimed. The mark isn't permanent yet, he said. It's an invitation, a calling, but they have to respond. They have to choose to accept what heaven is offering. And most, his voice broke, most will ignore it. They'll call it coincidence. They'll say it's just their algorithm, just chance that they saw this message. They'll let the moment pass. I saw another vision then, a man, maybe 40 years old, sitting in bed with his phone. He was scrolling through videos, half asleep, wasting the insomniac hours before dawn. And he paused, just for a moment, on a video with a title that caught his attention. If you see this before you sleep, you've been marked by heaven. Don't skip this. Something stirred in his spirit, a whisper. Watch this. This is important. But then he thought, it's late. I'm tired. I'll watch it tomorrow if I remember. He scrolled past, and I watched as a light that had been beginning to form on his forehead flickered and went dark. No, I shouted. The grief that hit me was overwhelming, like watching someone step in front of a train. Why? Why didn't he watch? Why didn't he listen? Because he's been trained not to, Jesus said quietly. The enemy has spent decades teaching people to ignore the stirrings of the Spirit, to dismiss promptings as random thoughts, to prioritize comfort and convenience over obedience. And now, when it matters most, when the marking is happening and time is running out, they can't recognize my voice anymore. He turned back to the valley, arms outstretched again, and his voice rose, echoing off the granite peaks around us. How long have I called to you? How long have I knocked at the door of your heart? How long have I placed messages in your path, people in your life, circumstances designed to wake you up, and you've ignored them all? The wind became a roar. The stars seemed to pulse in rhythm with his words. I am marking my own right now, in this hour, on this night. Those who have ears to hear, let them hear. Those who have eyes to see, let them see. But know this, the marking is not automatic. It is an invitation to which you must respond. I fell to my knees on the cold granite. My hands were shaking. My whole body was shaking. What do they need to do? I asked. How do they respond? Jesus knelt beside me, and the tenderness in his face was almost harder to bear than the authority had been. They need to stop scrolling, he said. They need to pay attention. They need to recognize that heaven engineered this moment, this specific moment when they're seeing this message, and they need to say, yes, yes, I see you. Yes, I hear you. Yes, I accept the mark. Yes, I want to be ready for what's coming. He stood and helped me to my feet. Tomorrow night, he said, come back here. There is more you need to understand, more you need to see. The marking is only the beginning. And then he was gone. The cold slammed back into me immediately. The wind returned to its previous violence, buffeting me so hard I had to step back from the edge. The valley below was dark again, just scattered lights and shadows. But I was changed, fundamentally, permanently changed. I stood there for another hour, maybe longer, trying to process what had happened. The stars wheeled overhead. The temperature continued to drop. Eventually, I made my way back down the mountain, stumbling in the darkness, my mind reeling. Now I'm sitting in my room, and it's 6:15 a.m., and I haven't slept, and I know I need to tell you this. I need you to understand what's happening right now, in this moment, as you read these words. You didn't find this message by accident. You didn't stumble across it randomly. Heaven put it in your path. The algorithm, whatever you want to call it, is being used by God himself to reach you, specifically you, right now. And you're at a choice point. You can dismiss this. You can say it's just an actor with a wild story, just another piece of internet content designed to manipulate your emotions. You can scroll past and forget you ever saw it. Or you can recognize the stirring you feel right now in your spirit. That sense of this is important that you can't quite explain. That feeling that kept you reading this far when you normally would have clicked away. That's the mark beginning to form. Jesus is standing at the door of your heart right now, and knocking. He's saying, I've chosen you to receive this warning. I've marked you as mine, but you have to open the door. You have to respond. Tomorrow night, I'm going back to that mountain. Jesus told me there's more. More I need to see, more I need to understand about what this marking means and what's coming for those who ignore it. But tonight, right now, I need you to do something. I need you to leave a comment below that says, I accept the mark. That's it. Just those 4 words. It's a declaration to heaven, to yourself, to the spiritual realm, that you're saying yes to what God is doing right now, that you're not going to let this moment pass, that you're choosing to be marked as His own. And then I need you to share this message, not because I need views or likes or subscribers, although if you want to support this ministry, please do subscribe and hit that notification bell, but because there are other people in your life who need to see this, who need to be marked, who need this warning before it's too late. The deadline is January 10th, 2026. I don't know why that date, but that's what I heard on the mountain. That's when something shifts. That's when the invitation closes for some and the marking becomes permanent for others. You have 30 days. Don't waste them. Don't. I'll see you tomorrow night with part 2. Same mountain, deeper truth, more intense encounter, but only if you're marked, only if you're one of the ones who said yes. I returned to the mountain at 1:33 a.m. on the night of December 12th. This time, I knew exactly where I was going. This time, the desperation wasn't unnamed. It was specific, razor sharp, cutting into my consciousness every moment I tried to do anything else throughout the day. I'd attempted to sleep earlier in the evening, tried to rest before making the climb again, but the moment I closed my eyes, I saw them, the faces of the unmarked, the millions moving through their lives in complete oblivion to what was coming. The man who scrolled past, the woman who dismissed the stirring in her spirit as indigestion, the teenager who laughed at the title and kept swiping, and I saw the tears on Jesus's face. So at 1 a.m., I got dressed again, warmer this time, having learned from the previous night's brutal cold, and I drove to the trailhead. The temperature had dropped even further. My car's dashboard read 29 degrees, below freezing, the kind of cold that makes your lungs ache with every breath. Before I continue, I need to pause and acknowledge something. Yesterday, after I posted part 1, something extraordinary happened. Thousands of you, thousands, left comments saying, I accept the mark. I sat in my hotel room reading them, one after another, and I wept. Not because of the numbers, but because I could feel it. I could feel heaven responding. I could sense the spiritual realm moving, sealing, claiming those who said yes. But I also saw the view count, and I saw that for every person who commented, there were 100 who watched and said nothing, 1,000 who scrolled past without clicking, tens of thousands who saw the title and kept moving. And that reality, that mathematical proof of what Jesus showed me on the mountain, broke my heart all over again. If you're watching this right now and you didn't comment yesterday, it's not too late. You can still say yes. You can still accept the mark. But I'm telling you with everything in me, don't wait. Don't assume you'll have another chance. Don't treat this like just another video you'll get back to when you have time. You don't have time. None of us do. Now let me tell you what happened on the second night. The climb was harder in the deeper cold. My flashlight beam seemed weaker somehow, swallowed by the darkness more quickly. The wind was already howling, even down in the trees, making the pines sway and creak ominously. Twice I slipped on patches of ice I hadn't noticed, nearly turning my ankle on the rocky trail. But I pushed upward, higher, closer to the stars that blazed with that same impossible brightness I'd witnessed the night before. I reached the rocky outcrop at 2:11 a.m., earlier than the previous night, and immediately I knew something was different. The wind had stopped, completely, utterly. The air was perfectly still, perfectly silent. And yet it wasn't peaceful. It was the stillness of held breath, of anticipation, of something massive about to happen. And it was warmer. Not warm, still well below freezing, but warmer than it should have been. The cold felt suspended, held back by something I couldn't see. I walked to the edge of the outcrop and looked down at the valley. A thin layer of fog had moved in since the previous night, filling the lower elevations like a silver sea. The scattered lights of houses and farms seemed to float on its surface, disconnected from the earth, adrift in some liminal space between heaven and ground. You came back. His voice came from behind me this time. I spun around, my heart hammering, and there he was, Jesus, standing in the center of the granite shelf, his hands at his sides, his eyes fixed on me with that same devastating combination of love and knowing. Of course I came back, I said, my voice hoarse. You told me to. You said there was more. There is always more, he said quietly. The question is never whether there's more to show. The question is whether hearts are ready to receive it, whether minds are prepared to accept what contradicts everything they've been taught. He gestured toward the valley, toward the sea of fog below us. Come, stand beside me. Look at what I see. I moved to his side, actually standing next to the Son of God, close enough to hear his breathing, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his presence like standing near a banked fire, and I looked where he pointed. The fog began to glow, not with physical light, but with something else, something spiritual. And as I watched, the fog became translucent, then transparent, and I could see through it to the valley floor below. But again, as on the previous night, I wasn't seeing just the physical reality, I was seeing the spiritual truth underneath. The valley was full of paths, millions of them, billions maybe. Each person I could see, and I could suddenly see them all. Every single human being in the valley below, going about their lives even in these pre-dawn hours, was walking on a path. Some paths were broad and smooth, wide highways that looked easy to travel. Others were narrow and rocky, difficult to navigate. Some paths ran parallel for a while before diverging. Others crossed and recrossed in complex patterns. But every single path led somewhere, and as I watched, I began to see the destinations. Oh God, I whispered. Oh Jesus, no. Most of the paths, the vast majority, ended at a cliff. Not gradually, not with warning signs or barriers. They just ended, and the people walking them couldn't see it. They were laughing, talking on phones, listening to music, completely absorbed in their daily concerns, and they were walking straight toward an edge they couldn't perceive. This is what people don't understand about the marking, Jesus said, and his voice was heavy with grief so profound it seemed to weigh down the very air. The mark isn't arbitrary, it isn't random, it's a warning. It's me trying to get people's attention before they reach the edge. It's heaven shouting, "Stop! Look, see where your path is leading." But they're not stopping, I said, watching person after person after person walk steadily toward destruction. They're not looking. No, he agreed. They're not. Do you know why? I shook my head, unable to tear my eyes away from the terrible vision below. Because they've been taught that all paths lead to the same destination, he said. They've been told that it doesn't matter what you believe or how you live, that a loving God would never actually let anyone be lost. They've been assured by comfortable preachers and popular teachers that judgment is old-fashioned, that hell is metaphorical, that everyone eventually makes it to heaven one way or another. His voice rose, taking on an edge I hadn't heard before. Not anger exactly, but something close. Righteous indignation, holy fury at the lies that were lulling people to sleep as they walked toward destruction. They've been given a false peace, he said, a sedative. And now, when I try to wake them up, when I place a message in their path, when I stir their spirit with a warning, when I offer them the mark that says, this one is mine, this one is protected, this one is on a different path, they're too drowsy to respond. They think, I'm fine, I'm a good person, I believe in God, I'll deal with spiritual things later when I have more time. He turned to face me fully, and the intensity in his eyes made me take an involuntary step backward. Jonathan, do you understand what the mark actually is? Do you comprehend what's happening when someone says, I accept the mark? I think so, I stammered. It's a seal, protection, a sign that they belong to you. Yes, he said, but it's more than that. The mark is a path change. When someone accepts the mark, they're not just getting a spiritual stamp of approval, they're being moved from one path to another, from the broad road that leads to destruction to the narrow path that leads to life. And that move, that transition, requires a choice. It requires repentance. It requires turning around and walking in a different direction, even when that direction looks harder, even when everyone around them is still on the easy road. He walked to the very edge of the outcrop, and I followed, my legs shaking. The fog had cleared in places below, and I could see more clearly now. I could see specific people. A woman in her 30s sitting at her kitchen table in the middle of the night, unable to sleep. She'd seen the video, she'd felt the stirring, but she'd thought, this is just emotional manipulation. This is just an actor using Jesus' name to get views. And she'd closed her phone and gone back to bed. I watched her path, and I saw it bend slightly, a moment where it could have changed direction, and then straighten again, continuing toward the cliff in the distance. No, I groaned. No, please. She had a choice, Jesus said gently. I gave her a choice. I put the message directly in her path. I stirred her spirit. I gave her every opportunity. But she chose to dismiss it. She chose the comfortable explanation that let her stay on the path she was already on. He showed me another. A teenager, maybe 17, scrolling through videos after midnight when he should have been asleep. He saw the title. He actually clicked on it, got further than most. He watched for 3 minutes, 5 minutes. But then his friend's group chat started pinging with memes and jokes, and the pull of distraction was stronger than the pull of the spirit. He switched apps. He never went back, and his path, too, continued unchanged. Stop, I said, tears streaming down my face now. Please stop. I can't watch this. You have to watch this, Jesus said, and there was steel in his voice now, because you have to understand what's at stake. You have to understand why the marking matters, why the deadline matters, why I'm being so urgent, so insistent, so intense about getting people's attention right now. He swept his arm across the valley, and the scale of what I was seeing suddenly expanded. I was no longer looking at just one valley, one region. I was seeing the whole world, continents, nations, cities, billions of people on billions of paths, and so many of those paths ending at edges. The harvest is coming, Jesus said. The separation is coming. The moment is coming when I return not to invite, but to judge, not to offer, but to finalize. And the marking that's happening right now, tonight, through this message, through 1,000 other ways I'm reaching out across the world, is the final offer, the last call, the ultimate invitation to change paths before it's too late. The wind returned suddenly, violently, screaming across the outcrop with enough force to nearly knock me down. But Jesus stood unmoved, steady as the mountain itself. How much time? I shouted over the wind. How much time do they have? The deadline I gave you is real, he shouted back. January 10th. But understand, Jonathan, that's not the end of all grace. That's not when I stop loving people or when salvation becomes impossible. That's when this specific marking period closes. That's when the invitation extended through this message reaches its expiration. After that date, those who said yes will be sealed. Those who ignored it will no longer feel the stirring when they encounter it. The opportunity specific to this moment will be gone. He walked toward me through the wind, and it parted around him like water around stone. Some people watching this will say it's manipulation, he said. They'll say, you can't put a deadline on God's grace. You can't create artificial urgency for spiritual things. But tell me, Jonathan, if a building is on fire and I tell people they have 10 minutes to evacuate before the exits are blocked, is that manipulation or is that truth? It's truth, I whispered. The building is on fire, he said. The world is burning. Time is shorter than anyone realizes, and I'm offering a way out, a path change, a marking, a seal that says, this one is mine, protect this one, prepare this one for what's coming. But they have to accept it. They have to choose it. They have to say yes. Another vision crashed over me then. I saw a man, middle-aged, successful by the world's standards. He'd built a comfortable life, good job, nice house, happy family. He believed in God in an abstract way. He would have called himself a Christian if asked, but he'd never really surrendered, never really made Jesus Lord, never really let go of control. He saw the message, felt the stirring, and thought, my life is good. Why would I need some dramatic spiritual experience? Why would I need to be marked? I'm doing fine. His path stretched ahead of him, comfortable and smooth, for years, decades maybe. And then, abruptly, the cliff, and I watched him step off it, not in some distant future, but soon, so soon. An accident no one could have predicted, a medical emergency that came without warning. And he was gone, and the comfortable path he'd been so confident about ended in the very destruction he'd never believed would come to him. I collapsed to my knees on the granite, sobbing. The weight of it was unbearable, the scale of the loss, the sheer number of people refusing the lifeline they were being thrown. Jesus knelt beside me and put his hand on my shoulder. The warmth of his touch drove back the cold, drove back the wind, created a pocket of peace in the middle of the chaos. I know it hurts, he said quietly. I know it's almost too much to bear. But this is what I bear every moment of every day, this grief, this watching people I died for choose the path that leads away from me. This is what broke my heart in Gethsemane. This is what made me sweat drops of blood. Not the physical suffering of the cross. I could endure that. but the knowledge of how many would reject what that suffering purchased for them. What do I tell them? I asked desperately. What do I say to make them understand? Tell them the truth, he said. Tell them that the stirring they feel when they see this message isn't random, it's me, knocking. Tell them that the path they're on leads somewhere, and they need to look honestly at where that somewhere is. Tell them that accepting the mark isn't just agreeing with a video, it's choosing to let me redirect their life, even when that redirect is uncomfortable, even when it means admitting they've been going the wrong direction. He helped me to my feet and held both my hands in his. His grip was firm, strong, real, more real than anything I'd ever touched. Tomorrow night, he said, come back one more time. The third night, the final revelation. I need to show you what happens to those who accept the mark versus those who don't. I need to show you the full picture. Can you bear it? I don't know, I said honestly. Tonight almost destroyed me. I'll give you strength, he promised. I'll sustain you, but the message must be delivered completely. People need to see the full truth, not just the comfortable parts. And then he was gone again, and I was alone on the mountain in the screaming wind and the brutal cold. I made it back to my room by 4:30 a.m. I've been sitting here for hours now, wrestling with what I saw, wrestling with the weight of it, wrestling with whether I should even share all of this, whether people will think I've lost my mind, whether the backlash will be worth it. But then I remember the faces, the people on the paths heading toward cliffs, and I remember Jesus's tears, and I know I have to keep going. Listen to me. Please, I'm begging you. If you're watching this and you haven't accepted the mark yet, if you've been hesitant, skeptical, waiting to see how this plays out, you need to make a choice right now, not tomorrow, not when you have more time to think about it, right now, because every moment you wait, you're walking further down a path, and some paths don't offer a lot of opportunities to turn around. Leave a comment right now that says, I accept the mark. And then, this is crucial, you need to actually let Jesus redirect your life. You need to pray right now, wherever you are. Jesus, I'm saying yes, I'm accepting the mark. I'm asking you to show me what path I'm on and to move me to the narrow path that leads to life. I surrender control. I make you Lord. I accept the invitation. That's it. That's the response heaven is looking for. Not complicated, not religious, just honest surrender. And for those of you who commented yesterday, thank you. Thank you for saying yes. But now comes the harder part, living like someone who's been marked, walking the narrow path even when everyone around you is on the broad road, staying alert even when the culture is trying to lull you back to sleep. I'm going to give you a practical challenge. For the next 24 hours, just 24 hours, I want you to live with this question in the front of your mind. Where is my path leading? When you make decisions, when you spend your time, when you choose what to watch or read or think about, ask yourself, does this move me toward Jesus or away from him? Does this keep me on the narrow path or pull me back toward the broad road? Just 24 hours. Try it. See what happens when you live with that level of awareness. Tomorrow night, technically tonight, December 13th, I go back to the mountain for the third time. Jesus said it will be the most intense, the final revelation, the complete picture. I'm afraid of what I'm going to see, but I'm more afraid of not delivering the message. Share this video. Please, I know I keep asking, but there are people in your life who need to see this, who need to be marked, who are on paths heading toward cliffs and don't know it. Maybe you're sharing this video as the last chance they get. Maybe you're the instrument heaven wants to use to redirect someone's path. Don't waste that opportunity. Subscribe if you haven't. Comment if you're committed. Share if you care about the people around you. And whatever you do, don't ignore the stirring in your spirit. Don't dismiss what heaven is doing right now. Don't be one of the ones who scrolls past the most important message they'll ever see. 28 days left until January 10th. The clock is ticking. If you're marked, you won't be able to stay away. The third night, I didn't wait until after midnight. I couldn't. All day on December 12th, after posting part 2, I felt it building, not just in my spirit, but in my body. Physical symptoms I can't fully explain. My hands trembled. My heart raced at random moments. Twice I nearly passed out just standing in my hotel room. It was as if my physical form was struggling to contain what I'd witnessed, struggling to process the weight of revelation that had been poured into me over the previous 2 nights. At 11:47 p.m., I gave up trying to wait. I got in my car and drove to the trailhead. The temperature had dropped again. The dashboard read 24 degrees. But I barely felt it. My entire body was burning from the inside like I was running a fever, though when I checked my temperature it was normal. The climb took 45 minutes. I didn't rush. Something told me to take my time, to prepare myself, to use the ascent as a kind of spiritual bracing for what was coming. The moon had risen, just a crescent, but enough to cast faint silver light through the pines. I didn't need my flashlight as much. I could see the path. I reached the rocky outcrop at 12:37 a.m. on December 13th, and he was already there. Jesus stood in the exact center of the granite shelf, but he looked different. Not in form. He still wore the simple robes, still had that same face I'd studied and portrayed for years. But in presence, he seemed larger somehow, more solid, more real than the rocks beneath my feet, more substantial than the mountains around us. The air itself seemed to bend around him, and the crescent moon above cast its light not on him but through him, as if he were made of something that transcended physical matter. "Jonathan," he said, and his voice resonated not just in my ears but in my chest, in my bones. "Are you ready for what I must show you tonight?" "No," I answered honestly, "but I'm here anyway." Something that might have been a smile flickered across his face, sad, knowing, proud somehow. "That's faith," he said. "Showing up even when you're not ready, saying yes even when you're afraid. That's what I'm looking for. That's what the mark represents." He held out his hand to me. "Come, don't just stand at the edge this time. Come into the center with me. What I'm about to show you requires you to be anchored, grounded, held in place. Otherwise, the vision will shatter you." I walked to him on shaking legs and took his hand. The moment our palms touched, everything changed. The outcrop, the mountain, the physical world, it was all still there, but it became translucent, like a thin veil overlaying something infinitely more real. And through that veil, I could see into the spiritual realm with a clarity that made the previous 2 nights seem like I'd been looking through frosted glass. "Watch," Jesus said, "and understand what the marking truly means. Understand what's coming. Understand why the time is so short and the urgency so great." The sky above us began to shift. The stars didn't disappear, but they rearranged themselves, forming patterns, pictures, scenes playing out across the dome of heaven. And I realized I was watching time itself, past, present, and future laid out simultaneously. "Since the foundation of the world," Jesus said, his voice taking on the cadence of someone telling an ancient story, "my Father has been marking his own, in every generation, in every nation, through every dispensation of human history. Noah was marked, Abraham was marked, Moses, David, the prophets, all marked, all called, all given a specific assignment in a specific time for a specific purpose. The stars showed me flashes of these ancient figures, moments of their calling, the weight of assignment settling on them like a mantle. In every era," he continued, "there comes a moment of separation, a moment when the marked are distinguished from the unmarked, when those who belong to my Father are set apart from those who belong to the world. The flood was such a moment. The Exodus was such a moment. The Babylonian captivity, the destruction of Jerusalem, these weren't random catastrophes, they were separations, judgments, the fulfillment of warnings that had been given but not heeded." The scene in the stars shifted, and I saw something that made my breath catch in my throat. I saw the current moment, right now, December 13th, 2025, marked in the timeline of history like a pin in a map. And I saw lines of light spreading out from it, reaching backward to all those previous moments of separation, and forward to something massive looming in the near future. "This is another such moment," Jesus said quietly. "Right now, this generation, this year, this is when another separation begins, the final marking before the final harvest. And most of my church, most of those who call themselves by my name, are asleep. They don't see it. They don't recognize what time it is." "Show me," I said, though everything in me wanted to close my eyes, wanted to turn away. "Show me what's coming." Jesus raised his free hand, his other still gripped mine like an anchor, and the vision exploded across not just the sky, but the entire landscape around us. The mountains became screens, the valley below became a window, and I saw the world as it is right now, billions of people in cities and towns and villages across every continent, and I saw the markers being placed, not by human hands, not by any earthly authority, but by angels, thousands of them, millions of them, moving through the population, placing seals on foreheads, responding to prayers and decisions and moments of surrender happening in real time. Every time someone watched the video and said, "I accept the mark," I saw an angel move to them and place a seal, a glowing symbol, intricate as a fingerprint, unique to each person, but all bearing the same essential signature, the name of the Lamb. "These are mine," Jesus said, and the love in his voice was almost painful in its intensity. "These have heard my voice. These have responded to the invitation. These will be protected in what's coming." "Protected from what?" I asked, though I already knew I didn't want the answer. The vision shifted. Yar. I saw the immediate future. Not years away, not decades, but soon. Months. Weeks, maybe. The world I was looking at was the same world we live in now, but it was unraveling. Economic systems collapsing like houses of cards. Weather patterns lurching into extremes. Social order fragmenting under pressures no one had anticipated. And through it all, disease, famine, war. Not the slow burn of history's usual tragedies, but a sudden cascade, like a dam breaking, like dominoes falling faster and faster. "This is the beginning of sorrows," Jesus said, and I recognized the phrase from Matthew 24. Birth pains. And just as birth pains grow closer together and more intense as the moment of delivery approaches, so these events will intensify. What took years to unfold before will take months. What took months will take weeks. Time itself is compressing as creation groans toward the moment of my return. I watched, horror-struck, as the catastrophes played out. But then I noticed something. The marked ones, those with the seals on their foreheads, weren't untouched by the events. They weren't magically transported away from difficulty, but they moved through it differently. Where others panicked, they had peace. Where others despaired, they had hope. Where others turned on each other, they formed communities of radical love and mutual support. And more than that, they were being used. The angels guided them to specific places at specific times. A marked woman showing up with food for a family about to starve. A marked man with medical training arriving exactly when someone needed help. A marked teenager speaking words of hope to someone on the brink of suicide. The marking isn't just about protection, Jesus explained, watching the same scenes I was seeing. It's about deployment. It's about having an army of willing servants in place when the darkness intensifies. It's about light bearers positioned strategically throughout the world so that even in the worst moments, my love is still visible. My presence is still accessible. My gospel is still being proclaimed. "But those without the mark," I started to say, then trailed off as I watched. Those without the seal went through the same events, but experienced them completely differently, without the supernatural peace, without the angelic guidance, without the sense of purpose that anchored the marked ones. I watched them spiral into fear, into violence, into desperate attempts to save themselves that only made things worse. And worst of all, I watched them become increasingly unable to perceive spiritual truth. It was as if a veil had descended over their minds. People would try to tell them about Jesus and they literally couldn't process the words. The message would slide off their consciousness like water off glass. "When people repeatedly reject my voice," Jesus said, his grip on my hand tightening, "when they consistently choose to dismiss the stirring of my spirit, when they scroll past the messages I place in their path and ignore the warnings I send through dreams and circumstances and prompting, eventually, their capacity to perceive spiritual reality diminishes. It's not that I stop speaking, it's that they lose the ability to hear. Their spiritual ears become deaf, their spiritual eyes become blind." "That's what Paul meant in Romans 1, I whispered, making the connection, when he talks about God giving people over to a depraved mind. It's not that God actively curses them, it's that he stops fighting against their choice to reject him. "Yes," Jesus said. "And that's what makes this marking period so critical. Right now, ears can still hear, eyes can still see, hearts can still respond, but there's a point of no return approaching, a moment when the separation becomes final, when those who are marked are sealed permanently, and those who refuse the mark become hardened in their refusal." The scene changed again, and I saw something that brought me to my knees, even though I was already holding Jesus' hand. I saw the moment of his return, not the quiet, intimate meetings we'd been having on this mountain, not the suffering servant hanging on a cross, but the King returning in power and glory, riding out of heaven with armies of angels behind him, coming to judge the living and the dead. And I saw the separation. Those with the mark on their foreheads lifted up to meet him in the air, transformed in an instant, changed from mortal to immortal, caught up in a joy so complete it was almost terrifying in its intensity. I saw people of every nation, every tribe, every tongue. The marked ones from throughout history, all gathered together, all bearing that same seal, all recognized as belonging to the King. And I saw those without the mark, still on earth, still in their mortal bodies, looking up in confusion and horror as they finally understood what they'd missed, what they'd dismissed, what they'd scrolled past and ignored and put off until it was too late. The wailing. Dear God, the wailing. The sound of ultimate, irreversible regret. The sound of people realizing they'd been invited to the most important event in history and they'd chosen to skip it because they were too busy, too comfortable, too convinced it couldn't really be that urgent. No, I sobbed. Please no. Give them another chance. Give them more time. Time is what I've been giving, Jesus said, and now there were tears on his face too, streaming down and falling onto the granite beneath us, each drop catching the starlight. 2,000 years I've been giving time. Generation after generation I've been sending warnings, offering invitations, placing messages in paths. How much time is enough? How many chances? How many ignored stirrings? How many scrolled past warnings? At what point does mercy become enabling? At what point does patience become cruelty, allowing people to continue on a path that leads to destruction because I'm too loving to tell them the truth? He pulled me to my feet, literally lifted me with one hand, strength flowing from him into me, and turned me to face him directly. This is why I'm being so urgent right now, he said, his voice intense, commanding, impossible to ignore. This is why I'm using language that makes comfortable Christians uncomfortable. This is why I'm putting deadlines on grace periods and creating specific markers for specific times, because time is short, the moment is close, and I love them too much to let them sleepwalk into judgment thinking everything is fine. The vision was fading now, the spiritual realm becoming veiled again, the ordinary world reasserting itself. But Jesus didn't disappear. He stayed solid, present, his hands now on both my shoulders, his eyes locked on mine. When you post this tomorrow, he said, people will accuse you of fear-mongering. They'll say you're being manipulative, that you're using scare tactics, that the God they serve wouldn't operate this way. But tell me, Jonathan, is it fear-mongering to tell people the building is on fire? Is it manipulation to warn them the bridge is out ahead? Is it scare tactics to put up a sign that says danger, cliff ahead, when there is in fact a cliff ahead? No, I said. It's truth. It's love. It's the only merciful thing to do. Yes, he said, and those who reject the message will often attack the messenger. They'll come after you. They'll say you're crazy, that you're compromising the gospel, that you're leading people astray. Can you endure that? Can you deliver this message knowing the cost? I thought about the comments I'd already been reading. The skeptics, the critics, the people who'd dismissed the first two parts as emotional manipulation or religious theater. I thought about what would happen when this third part went live, with its descriptions of judgment and separation and the point of no return. And I thought about the faces I'd seen, the marked ones, the thousands who'd said yes, the ones who would be reached through this message that wouldn't be reached any other way. I can endure it, I said. I have to. Because you're asking me to. Because they need to hear it. Because I'd rather be mocked for telling the truth than celebrated for remaining silent while people walk toward destruction. Jesus pulled me into an embrace then, fully human, fully God, holding me on that mountain like a father holds a son, like a friend holds a friend. And I felt the weight of assignment settle on me. Heavy, yes, but also somehow right. Meant. Purposed. Tomorrow night, he said quietly, his voice returning to gentleness now that the vision had been delivered. You don't need to come back to the mountain. The revelations are complete. What remains is the application, the practical outworking, the challenge you'll give to those who've been marked to live like people who truly understand what time it is. He released me and stepped back, and even as I watched, he became less solid, more transparent, fading back into whatever realm he'd emerged from. One more thing, he said, his voice now seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Tell them this, the mark isn't a guarantee of ease. It's not a promise that everything will be comfortable. It's an assignment to be light in darkness, to be salt that preserves, to be the answer to the prayers that are about to be prayed by millions who've ignored me until catastrophe forced them to look up. The marked ones will suffer, but they'll suffer with purpose, with power, with my presence sustaining them, and their suffering will be temporary, leading to glory that outweighs it all. And then he was gone, and I was alone on the mountain with the stars and the cold and the weight of everything I'd been shown. I stayed there until dawn, didn't even try to descend in the darkness, just sat on the granite, wrapped in my jacket, watching the sky gradually lighten from black to purple to pink to gold as the sun rose over the eastern peaks. And as I watched that sunrise, I understood something. The marking, the urgency, the warning, it wasn't primarily about fear. It was about opportunity. Jesus wasn't trying to terrorize people into compliance. He was trying to wake them up to the greatest invitation they'd ever receive, to be part of his army of light in the darkest hour, to be used, to matter, to have a purpose that transcends the mundane concerns that consume most of human existence. The people who accept the mark aren't just escaping judgment, they're entering into destiny, and that changes everything. Now I'm back in my room, and it's December 13th, midday, and I'm preparing to post this. And I know what's going to happen. I know the accusations that will come, the skeptics who'll say I'm making all this up, the comfortable Christians who'll insist their God wouldn't be this urgent, this intense, this demanding of a response. But I also know the marked ones will recognize truth when they hear it. They'll feel the stirring intensify. They'll sense the weight of assignment settling on them. They'll understand that something significant is happening right now, in this moment, through this message. So here's what I'm asking you to do. If you've been marked, if you said I accept the mark in the previous videos, then right now, today, I want you to ask Jesus, what's my assignment? What do you want me to do? How do you want to use me in what's coming? And then be quiet, listen, pay attention to the promptings you feel over the next 24 hours, the people you think about unexpectedly, the places you feel drawn to go, the words you feel urged to speak. That's the mark activating, that's the assignment beginning. And if you haven't accepted the mark yet, if you've been watching and waiting and hesitating, let me be crystal clear. After tonight's message, if you still don't respond, I can't help you anymore. I've delivered the revelation. I've shown you what Jesus showed me. I've warned you as clearly as I possibly can. The choice is yours. But know this, choosing not to decide is a decision. Waiting for more proof is an answer. Scrolling past is a response. And all of those lead to the same destination. 27 days left until January 10th. Tomorrow night, I'll post part 4, the final part, the practical application, the 30-minute daily challenge, the specific steps for those who've been marked to live out their assignment. But the revelation phase is complete. You now know what I know. You've seen what I've seen. What you do with that information will determine which side of the separation you're on when the moment comes. Choose wisely, choose today, choose life. It's been 3 days since that final night on the mountain, 3 days of processing, praying, wrestling with how to deliver this final message, 3 days of reading your comments, thousands upon thousands of you saying, I accept the mark, sharing your stories of how this message found you at exactly the right moment, describing the stirrings you felt, the promptings, the sense that something massive is shifting in the spiritual realm, and 3 days of watching the view counts and knowing that for every person who responded, there were hundreds who watched in silence. Thousands who scrolled past, tens of thousands who saw the title and kept moving, dismissing the stirring in their spirit as coincidence or algorithm or emotional manipulation. I've wept more in these 3 days than I have in the past 3 years combined. But I've also felt something else. Clarity. Purpose. The absolute certainty that what I'm about to share with you in this final part is exactly what needs to be said, exactly when it needs to be said, to exactly the people who need to hear it. If you're watching this, you're here for a reason. The marked ones know this instinctively. The unmarked ones won't make it this far. Something will distract them, pull them away, convince them they have better things to do with their time. But you're still here, still reading, still listening. That matters. Before I give you the practical application, the 30-minute daily challenge that will activate your marking and prepare you for what's coming, I need to tell you what happened when I went back to the mountain one more time. Not because Jesus told me to, not for another supernatural encounter, but because I needed to see that place in daylight. I needed to process what had happened there. I needed to stand on that rocky outcrop under normal circumstances and confirm to myself that it had all been real. I drove to the trailhead on the afternoon of December 14th. The temperature had risen. It was almost 50 degrees, unseasonably warm after the brutal cold of the previous nights. The hike up took about 40 minutes, same as always, but it felt completely different in daylight. The pines that had seemed ominous and dark at night were now just trees. The trail that had been treacherous in the darkness was clearly marked and relatively easy to navigate. The sounds of birds and small animals replaced the howling wind and eerie silence. When I reached the rocky outcrop, the first thing I noticed was how ordinary it looked. Just granite and sky, no glowing figures, no supernatural warmth, no angels marking foreheads or paths leading to cliffs, just a beautiful viewpoint overlooking a peaceful valley. And yet, I could still feel it, the residual presence, the sense that something holy had happened here, something that had permanently changed the spiritual atmosphere of this place. I walked to the exact spot where Jesus had stood that first night, arms outstretched toward the valley, and I looked down at the view he'd been looking at. The fog was gone. In its place, brilliant winter sunshine illuminated every detail of the landscape below. The river wound through the valley floor like a silver ribbon. Farms and houses dotted the countryside in neat patterns. Distant mountains formed a blue-gray backdrop against the horizon. It was achingly beautiful, the kind of scene that makes you understand why the Psalms constantly reference creation as testimony to God's glory. But I couldn't look at it the same way anymore, because I'd seen beneath the surface. I'd seen the paths. I'd seen the destinations. I'd seen the marked and the unmarked, the protected and the vulnerable, the awakened and the sleeping. And once you've seen that, once you've been given spiritual eyes to perceive what's really happening beneath the veneer of ordinary life, you can't unsee it. I stood there for over an hour, just looking, praying, thinking, and gradually, a question formed in my mind. What now? The revelation had been given, the warning had been delivered, thousands had accepted the mark. But what were we supposed to do with it? How were the marked ones supposed to live differently? What did it mean practically to be part of Jesus' army of light in the darkest hour? And that's when I heard it. Not an audible voice, not a supernatural manifestation, just a quiet knowing, settling into my spirit with the weight of truth. Tell them to give me 30 minutes. That was it. That was the assignment. That was the practical application of everything I'd been shown on the mountain. 30 minutes a day. That's what Jesus was asking for. That's what would activate the marking and prepare people for what's coming. Let me explain what that means. For most people who call themselves Christians, prayer is something that happens in fragments. A few minutes before bed, grace before meals, desperate pleas when crisis hits, maybe a worship song in the car, maybe a devotional app on the phone while waiting in line somewhere, bits and pieces, scraps, leftovers of time and attention after everything else has been given its due. And here's what I heard in my spirit on that mountain in the daylight. That's not going to be enough for what's coming. The marked ones need to be anchored, rooted, connected to me in a way that transcends casual religious activity. And that requires dedicated, undistracted, consistent time in my presence. 30 minutes, every single day, non-negotiable, not 30 minutes of listening to Christian podcasts while you do other things, not 30 minutes of scrolling through inspirational social media posts, not 30 minutes of worship music playing in the background while you work, 30 minutes of actual focused, undistracted engagement with Jesus. Here's what that looks like practically. Minutes 1 to 10. Stillness and listening. Find a quiet place where you won't be interrupted. Turn off your phone. Not on silent. Off. No music. No distractions. Just you and silence. And for the first 10 minutes, practice being still. Don't pray yet. Don't read yet. Don't do anything except sit in silence and pay attention to what you sense in your spirit. This is the hardest part for most people. We're not used to silence. We're not comfortable with stillness. Our minds race. We think about our to-do lists, our problems, our schedules. We get restless after 30 seconds and want to grab our phones or turn on music or do something productive. But this is where the marking activates. In the silence, you learn to recognize Jesus' voice. You become aware of the promptings of the Holy Spirit. You start to perceive the spiritual reality underneath the physical reality. And most importantly, you create space for God to speak without you drowning him out with your own noise. Some days you'll sense specific things, words, impressions, images, promptings about people you should contact or actions you should take. Other days you'll sense nothing except peace. Both are valuable. Both are building your capacity to live as someone who's marked. Minutes 11 to 20. Scripture and meditation. After 10 minutes of silence, open your Bible. Not a devotional, not a commentary, not someone else's interpretation. The actual Scripture. And I want you to read slowly, one chapter, one passage, even one verse if that's all you get through. But don't just read it. Meditate on it. Chew on it. Ask Jesus, what are you saying to me through these words? How does this apply to my life today? What do you want me to understand? And then, this is crucial, write down what you sense. Get a notebook, a journal, something physical where you can record what God is saying to you during these 30 minutes. Because here's what I learned on the mountain. The marked ones are going to receive assignments, specific directions, particular promptings about where to go, what to do, who to help. And if you don't write them down, you'll forget. The noise of daily life will drown out the quiet voice of the Spirit. The scripture you read during these 10 minutes isn't random entertainment or religious obligation. It's strategic intelligence from heaven. It's the commander giving orders to his soldiers. It's the king instructing his ambassadors. Treat it that way. Take it seriously. Let it reshape how you think and how you live. Minutes 21:30, prayer and intercession. The final 10 minutes are for prayer, but not the kind of prayer most people are used to. Not the "Dear God, please bless me and my family and give me a good day" kind of prayer. This is warfare prayer, intercession, standing in the gap for others. Here's what I want you to pray specifically during these final 10 minutes. First, pray for discernment. Ask Jesus to help you see people and situations the way he sees them. Ask him to give you spiritual eyes to recognize who else needs to be marked, who's on a path heading toward a cliff, who's on the verge of saying yes to the invitation but needs one more push. Second, pray for the people in your life by name, family members, coworkers, friends, neighbors. Specifically ask that if they're not marked, they would encounter a message that would stir their spirit, that they would have dreams, that they would experience divine appointments, that heaven would pursue them relentlessly until they say yes. Third, pray for yourself, for courage, for boldness, for the willingness to be used even when it's uncomfortable, for the strength to walk the narrow path even when everyone around you is on the broad road, for protection, spiritual, emotional, physical, in what's coming. And finally, pray this specific prayer every day. I'm going to give you the exact words because Jesus gave them to me on the mountain, and I believe they're key to activating the marking. Jesus, I am marked as yours. I bear your seal. I belong to you completely. Use me today as light in darkness. Guide me to the people and places where you want me positioned. Give me words to speak, actions to take, and the courage to obey even when I don't fully understand. I am yours. I am ready. I am willing. Send me. Pray that every day, and then pay attention to what happens throughout your day, the people who randomly cross your path, the conversations that develop unexpectedly, the opportunities that present themselves. That's the marking working. That's the assignment activating. Now I know what some of you are thinking. 30 minutes? I don't have 30 minutes. I'm too busy. I have work, family, responsibilities. I can't carve out that much time. Let me be very direct with you. Yes, you can. You absolutely can. Because here's the truth. You have time for what you prioritize. You have 30 minutes that you currently spend scrolling through social media, watching TV, playing games on your phone, or doing any number of activities that aren't actually important. The question isn't whether you have the time. The question is whether you're willing to prioritize this above other things. And if your honest answer is no, I'm not willing to do that, if 30 minutes a day feels like too much to invest in the relationship that determines your eternal destiny and your effectiveness in the most critical hour of human history, then I would gently suggest you might not actually be marked. You might have commented, "I accept the mark," because it sounded good or felt emotional in the moment, but you haven't actually surrendered. You haven't actually made Jesus Lord. You're still trying to fit him into your life instead of building your life around him. That sounds harsh, I know, but we're past the point where I can afford to be gentle about this. The deadline is January 10th, 2026. That's 28 days from today. And what I saw on that mountain, the separation, the judgment, the people who thought they had more time and discovered they didn't, compels me to tell you the unvarnished truth. If you're not willing to give Jesus 30 minutes a day, you're not going to make it through what's coming. The marked ones will survive, not because they're better people or more worthy, but because they'll be anchored, connected, receiving real-time guidance from heaven about where to go, what to do, how to navigate the chaos. The unmarked ones will panic, despair, and be swept away by events they can't control and don't understand. Which group do you want to be in? Let me tell you what's going to happen over these next 28 days if you commit to this 30-minute challenge. Days 1 to 7. It's going to be hard. Really hard. You're going to feel restless during the silence. Your mind is going to wander. You're going to convince yourself you're too busy, that you'll start tomorrow instead, that this is excessive or legalistic or unnecessary. The enemy is going to throw every possible distraction and excuse at you because he knows what happens when people actually connect with Jesus consistently. Push through, do it anyway. Commit to all 7 days before you evaluate whether it's working. Days 8 to 14. Something shifts. The silence becomes less uncomfortable. You start to recognize patterns in what you're sensing during the listening time. The scripture starts speaking to you more directly. The prayers become less rote and more genuine. You begin to notice divine appointments happening, people crossing your path who need exactly what you have to offer. This is when the marking starts to activate visibly. Days 15 to 21. You start to crave the 30 minutes. Instead of being a discipline you force yourself to do, it becomes the anchor of your day, the thing that centers you, grounds you, connects you. You notice you're becoming more sensitive to the Holy Spirit's promptings throughout the day, not just during the 30 minutes. You start to see people and situations differently. The spiritual vision increases. This is when the assignment becomes clear, when you understand specifically how Jesus wants to use you. Days 22 to 28. By the time you reach January 10th, if you've done this consistently, you will be fundamentally changed, not slightly improved, not a little more spiritual. Actually, substantially transformed into someone who operates from a different reality than most people around you. You'll have peace when others have panic. You'll have direction when others have confusion. You'll have purpose when others have despair. And people will notice. They'll start asking you what's different, why you're so calm, how you're managing to stay steady when everything feels like it's falling apart. And that's when you'll have the opportunity to tell them about the marking, to invite them to say yes, to be used to redirect someone's path at the last possible moment. This is what it means to be marked. This is the assignment. This is what the 30 minutes unlocks. Now let me address something I've seen in the comments over the past 3 days. Some people have asked, what happens after January 10th? Does the marking end? Does grace end? Can people not get saved after that date? Let me be absolutely clear. Salvation through Jesus Christ is available until the moment he returns. The cross accomplished eternal redemption. Anyone can repent and believe and be saved right up until their last breath or until Jesus comes back, whichever happens first. But this specific marking period, this particular invitation extended through this message at this time, has an expiration date. After January 10th, those who said yes will be sealed. The mark becomes permanent. The assignment becomes activated at full capacity, and those who ignored the invitation during this window will no longer feel the stirring when they encounter this message. It will become just words on a screen, just another video. They'll have moved past the moment of opportunity that heaven specifically engineered for them. Can they still be saved through other means? Yes. Can Jesus reach them in other ways? Absolutely. But this door, this specific door, closes on January 10th. And what I saw on the mountain suggests that as events accelerate, as the chaos intensifies, as the world unravels, it becomes exponentially harder for people to hear and respond. The noise increases, the distractions multiply. The spiritual deafness and blindness that come from repeated rejection of God's voice become more entrenched. So while technically there's still opportunity after January 10th, practically speaking, this might be the last clear chance many people have to say yes before circumstances make it nearly impossible. That's why the urgency. That's why the deadline. That's why I've been so intense about this message. Let me tell you one more thing that happened on the mountain that afternoon. Standing there in the daylight, looking out over the valley, I saw a vision. Not like the supernatural encounters of the previous nights, but more like a movie playing in my mind. I saw myself, months from now, standing in the same spot. And the valley below had changed. I could see smoke rising from multiple locations. I could see roads clogged with people trying to evacuate. I could see the physical evidence of the chaos Jesus had warned about. But I also saw lights, scattered throughout the valley like stars against darkness. And I understood that those lights were the marked ones, people who'd said yes to the invitation, who'd done the 30-minute challenge, who'd allowed Jesus to activate their assignments. They were positioned strategically throughout the region, being used to help, to heal, to speak hope, to demonstrate that God hadn't abandoned his creation even in the midst of judgment. And I heard that quiet voice again. This is what the marking is for, not to escape, not to avoid suffering, but to be positioned to be used when the world is most desperate for evidence that I'm still here, still active, still loving, still offering salvation to anyone who will turn to me. That vision has stayed with me. It's what drives me to deliver this message even when I'm exhausted, even when the critics attack, even when I question whether anyone is really listening. Because some of you are listening. Thousands of you. And those thousands, marked and activated and positioned strategically across the world, are going to make a difference that echoes into eternity. So here's what I'm asking you to do right now, today. First, if you haven't already, leave a comment that says, "I accept the mark." Don't overthink it. Don't wait until you feel worthy or ready. Just say yes. Let heaven know you're choosing to respond to the invitation. Second, commit to the 30-minute challenge starting tomorrow morning, not starting next week when things calm down. Tomorrow, December 17th. Set your alarm 30 minutes earlier if you have to. Rearrange your schedule, make it non-negotiable, and then do it every single day from now until January 10th, 28 consecutive days without missing one. Third, get a notebook specifically for this purpose. I'm serious about this. Something physical where you'll record what you sense during the silence, what stands out during the scripture reading, what promptings you receive during the prayer time. This notebook is going to become your assignment manual, the place where heaven downloads specific instructions for your particular role in what's coming. Fourth, tell someone. Share this message with at least one person who needs to hear it. Maybe it's a family member who's been on your heart. Maybe it's a friend who's been drifting spiritually. Maybe it's a coworker who's searching for meaning. Send them the link. Tell them it's important. Tell them heaven might be using you to get this message to them at exactly the right moment. Be the instrument that redirects someone's path. Fifth, join this community. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Turn on notifications, because over these next 28 days, I'm going to be posting updates, encouragements, and additional guidance for the marked ones. This isn't just about watching a video series and moving on. This is about being part of a movement, a family of believers who are taking this seriously, who are doing the 30-minute challenge together, who are preparing together for what's coming. And finally, sixth, live like someone who's been marked, starting today. Let the reality of what you now know change how you move through the world. When you're at work, look for the opportunities Jesus is positioning you to take. When you're with family, speak words of hope and life instead of participating in the constant negativity and fear. When you encounter chaos or difficulty, be the person who remains steady because you're anchored to something beyond circumstances. Be the light. Be the salt. Be the evidence that God is still here. 28 days from now on January 10th, 2026, something shifts. I don't know all the details of what that means practically. I don't know if it's a visible event or a spiritual threshold or something else entirely, but I know with absolute certainty, the same certainty I felt standing on that mountain in Jesus' presence, that we are approaching a point of no return. The marking is happening right now, the separation is beginning, the assignment is being given, and you get to choose which side of that separation you're on. I've delivered the message. I've shared everything Jesus showed me during those 3 nights on the mountain. I've given you the practical application, the 30-minute challenge that will activate the marking and prepare you for what's coming. I've warned you about the deadline. I've told you the truth as clearly and urgently as I know how. The rest is up to you. Some of you are going to do this. You're going to commit to the 30 minutes. You're going to say yes to the marking. You're going to allow Jesus to transform you from a casual believer into an activated, assigned, empowered light bearer in the darkest hour. And months from now, maybe years from now if we have that long, you're going to look back on this moment as the pivot point when everything changed for you. Others are going to watch this video, feel the stirring, maybe even leave a comment, and then go back to life as usual. The 30 minutes will seem like too much. The urgency will fade. You'll convince yourself you have more time, that it's not really that serious, that God understands you're busy. And eventually this message will become just another thing you watched once, another piece of content you consumed and forgot. I can't make the choice for you. Jesus won't make it for you either. That's what free will means. That's what genuine love requires, the ability to say no. But I'm begging you, don't say no. Don't scroll past. Don't let this moment pass. Because what I saw on that mountain, the paths leading to cliffs, the unmarked ones walking toward destruction without knowing it, the grief on Jesus' face as he watched people he died for refuse, the lifeline he was throwing them. That reality doesn't care about your doubts or your skepticism or your discomfort with urgent messages. The building is on fire. The alarm is sounding. The exits are being marked. and you're standing at a decision point that will determine whether you walk out safely or are trapped inside when the roof collapses. Choose life, choose the mark, choose to be used, choose Jesus, and then prove that choice by giving him 30 minutes a day for the next 28 days. That's it. That's the message. That's the assignment. That's what it means to be marked by heaven. I'm going to end with one final image, the same way Jesus ended our last conversation on the mountain. Picture that rocky outcrop, that granite shelf jutting out over the valley. Stand there with me in your imagination. Look down at the world spread out below, all the people going about their lives, all the paths intersecting and diverging, all the destinations rushing toward everyone whether they see them or not. Now picture Jesus standing beside you, his hand on your shoulder, his voice quiet but clear. You've been marked. You've been chosen. You've been assigned. Now the question is, will you accept the assignment? Will you do what I'm asking? Will you give me the time and attention necessary to equip you for what's coming? Will you be my light in the darkness? What's your answer? Leave it in the comments. Share this message. Start the 30-minute challenge tomorrow. Join the community of the marked. 28 days, that's all we have left in this invitation window. Make them count. I'll be praying for you. This community will be praying for you. And heaven is watching, not with judgment, but with hope. Hope that you'll say yes. Hope that you'll accept the mark. Hope that you'll be one of the ones who's ready when the moment comes. The choice is yours. But I'm telling you, with everything in me, choose wisely, choose today, choose to be marked. Because if you see this message, you've been given an opportunity that not everyone receives. Don't waste it.